ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सागरगणनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सागरनाथा श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपीश गोपिकांत राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयति गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दिनकारिणम्। So we are studying chapter 6. We completed 3, 4, 5. Chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, which is primarily Karma Yoga. So this chapter is Dhyana Yoga. So after covering Karma Yoga, Lord Krishna covers Dhyana Yoga. So if you remember, the last chapter, 5th chapter, ended with this very important verse which sets the context for the current chapter. Bhaktaram Yakyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Sahridam Sarvabhutanam Yatmaman Santi Mrichati. Yeah. A person in full consciousness of me. Who is the me referred here? Krishna, Lord Krishna. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities. Bhokta. Who is the real Bhokta? Lord Krishna says he is the ultimate Bhokta of everything. He is the knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme Lord of all planets and demigods. He is the Lord of all the planets and also all the demigods. Indra, Varuna, Vayu, all these demigods, they were all under him. And the benefactor and well-wisher of all the living entities, retains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Right? So everybody in this world is suffering because they do not understand this principle. This is the peace formula for the world. If they all recognize God as the central to the entity to be satisfied, then there will not be any there will not be any problem, there will not be any miseries. I'll just mute everybody. So the reason is, let's understand this, right? This is very important even to understand the next chapter. I'm just redoing once again. So one who understands that, one who does not understand this fact, right? He will be suffering because suppose if all the body parts do not work for the satisfaction of the tummy, right? If they don't work to feed the tummy, who is going to suffer? It is the body. All the body is going to become weak. If the hand says, "I'm not," why should I supply food to the belly like that? Why should I know if the hand says, "I won't supply," and the leg says, "I won't go anywhere," to get the food. If all the bodily parts do not support, supplying the food to the tummy, who is the true enjoyer of the within the body? Then all the body becomes sick. So similarly, so God is the whole. If we don't support the whole, we are not going to be, it's not for the sake of, for the pleasure of God that we are trying to serve God. It is for our own benefit actually. Just like you work for a company, you work for the entity company, right? You don't work, you may say you are working for yourself, but ultimately if the company is not benefiting from your work, they may terminate your job, right? So the whole should be satisfied. It is in our interest to serve in the benefit of for the benefit of the company. Then you grow and the company grows. So that's what in our experience we see. So similarly, we have a relationship with God. We don't realize that now because of our ignorance and the illusion that we are in. But when we understand that we are actually connected to God and our true happiness lies in serving God, until we recognize that fact, and it is in our own interest to serve God. So when we don't recognize that fact, we actually suffer in this world. Right? When we identify ourselves disconnected from God, and I do not feel that we are, then we feel many times morose. There will be too many ups and too many downs. Ups and downs will be too many. Right? When things are going in your favor, you feel very happy, elated. But there are more number of times when you don't feel, you feel miserable because situations will not be favorable to your expectation. So if you want to not be in that kind of state of ups and downs, sukha dukkha, all these dualities of experience in this world, I mean, there will be pains, but when you have the connection with God, all these won't change your overall consciousness. They don't affect you as much, right? People become we have seen some movie actors when they were having success, they're like on the on the moon, right? But suddenly they have a series of flops, right? Like they get like 4 flops, 5 continuously. Then they actually attempt suicide and they die, or they don't want to show their face to the world because they think that they are the one who is doomed. They don't recognize that their subordination to God. So when one understands actually everything happens, I only can desire, and God is the ultimate sanctioner, and material nature works to get what I need. So when one recognizes that, then there won't be so much shakiness in our life because of ups and downs, dualities, etc. Right? And he is the Lord of all the planets and demigods. Means he is the supreme of all. One time in the Puranas talk about the story of the Bali Maharaj. You might have heard Bali Maharaj, one of the kings in the demonoid families, right? There are demigods and there are demons. Demigods meaning Devatas. Devatas, Indra, Varuna, Vayu, all these 33 crore demigods who are actually like the rulers of lower planets, who supply all the necessary like things like what rain, air, Vayu, Agni, and all these are supplied by these demigods to in the lower planetary systems. And there are demons who are sons of children of Diti. They were they are in the lower planets, Atala, Vitala, Satala, Patala, Talatala, Rasatala. These are all the lower planetary systems, and they live there. There was a time when the demons become. So there will be times when the world, the Trilokas are dominated primarily by demons, and there will be times when demons are more powerful. It's again fluctuating situation. It's not like the same person will be the person is known as a demigod if he actually has faith in God. The way we differentiate a person who is a demon versus demigod is that demon is a person who do not recognize the superiority of God, the Supreme Lord. They do not accept Vishnu or Krishna for the matter. So, and demigods are obliged, they accept the superiority of the Supreme Lord and actually work in surrender to him. Yeah. So that's the difference between demigods and demons. And demons, there was a time when one of the demonoid king, Bali Maharaj, he actually dominates the demigods, and all the demigods have to flee from their, from their Sargaloka. At the time, the mother of the demigods, Aditi, approaches the Supreme Lord and prays to him to actually, and by the way, they are like, you know, Aditi and Diti are like sisters, and one mother gets demons, the other gets demigods. So they are all like brothers ultimately, all the demons and demigods. The mother of the demigods goes to the Lord and prays to him to actually protect his sons, her sons. And Lord, at the time when Bali Maharaj was showing his prowess over all the demigods, because he was so powerful at the time, the Supreme Lord takes the avatar of Vamana and he visits Bali Maharaj. And Bali Maharaj is very charitable and he begs from him 3 steps. No, the Lord, the Bali Maharaj asks, please ask anything. I want to serve you, Brahmana. You are so effulgent. I really, I'm mesmerized by your looks. So I definitely want to serve and make you happy. And Bali Maharaj, Lord Vamana says, I just need 3 steps. I'm a Brahmana. I don't want too many things. I just want 3 steps. Bali Maharaj says, no, how can you ask just 3 steps? I'm a king of all the planets, upper planets, middle planet, and the lower planets. I'm the king of everything. So ask anything. You can ask me a planet, I'll give you a planet. Later on, nobody should curse me that I gave just 3 steps to you. I'm a great king. Don't ask me for such small things. Then then Lord Vamana says, a person who cannot be satisfied with what he has, he can never be satisfied with whatever he gets. And then he sticks to his plan. And there was a kind of a transaction that signifies that he's going to fulfill his desire, the Bali Maharaj. And then Lord Vamana becomes Trivikrama. He expands into a huge form, and with one step he covers the entire Bhuloka, and with the second step he covers the upper planets, entire upper planets. So now he asks Bali Maharaj, where do I keep my 3rd step? And Bali Maharaj immediately recognized this is Lord Vishnu, but nobody else, because such prowess cannot be shown by anybody else. He recognizes that and immediately surrenders to Lord. He accepts Lord as the supreme owner of all the planets and demigods. This I'm just talking about this context here. And he immediately surrenders and says, there is no other place but my head. So keep your 3rd leg on my head. And Vamanadeva, pleased with his attitude, acceptance of the superiority of the Supreme Lord, he was very pleased with Bali Maharaj's attitude. Because, Bali Maharaj was the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj was the greatest devotee ever. So naturally, he had those qualities from his grandfather. And influenced by his grandfather, he actually accepts the Lord's superiority and he surrenders. And Lord immediately blesses him, saying that go to Sutalloka and be the king of it. And for now, give back this higher planet to the demigods. Let them enjoy it. And I'm so pleased with you that I will be there personally at the at your Sutalloka and actually protect anybody who comes, who passes. I'll protect your. You won't have any attacks from the demigods anymore. I will be the one who will be protecting your planet personally. So you can, Bali Maharaj was a great devotee himself. of Lord. It's an exception. Generally, demons do not worship Lord Vishnu, but he's an exception. He and Prahlad Maharaj. Um, so, and he gives that benediction to him, and he tells him, "Hey, Bali, don't worry. So you are now going back to your own planet and ruling it, but in your next life, you are going to become Indra, right? Indra is a post currently occupied by Purandara, and the post that is occupied by somebody else as Indra now, you will be the next head of the demigods. So ultimately, you will get it. It's not that it's just matter of this lifetime that you are going to be just in the Sutaloka. In that way, Lord, once the person surrenders to the Lord, he actually is so pleased and he gives. So the reason I'm telling this is so that shows the acceptance of Bali Maharaj to the superiority of the Lord. And that example also shows how the Lord is actually the Lord of all the planets and demigods. Initially, Bali Maharaj was thinking he is the head of all, he is the the ruler and the king of all these higher, lower, and middle planetary systems. But after having the presence of the Lord, he immediately accepts his position as subordinate and accepts Lord's superiority. And immediately he was able to please the Lord and achieve so many benedictions. So that was a short story to illustrate that Lord is actually the Lord of all the planets and demigods. And he is the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. Right? For example, all of us, right now we are in this human body, we have certain family relations, wife, husband, children, mother, father. But what happens when we leave this body, right? Paramatma is the only one who accompanies with us. Always, wherever you go, whichever form you take, you may become an animal, you may become an ant, you may become a tree, doesn't matter. He is always there with you as long as you are in the material world. Once you go to the spiritual world, he is not there with you. But he is always there with you. So he is the ultimate well-wisher. He wants you to be back with him. So he is the ultimate benefit. And everything we get is actually given by Lord. He is the ultimate benefactor as well. So one who recognizes these facts, he is the supreme Lord of all the planets and demigods. He is the real well-wisher of everybody. He is there with us all the time. He is the real benefactor. Such a person do not go through the miseries of material existence. All the difficulties of material life will be like, they are not going to block him, in the material world. So he will easily pass through all the difficulties of material existence. Okay? So that was the ending of the fifth chapter. Then Dhyana Yoga begins. We studied first 3 verses in the primarily Krishna discusses about sannyas and Nishkam Karma Yoga. In sannyas, one gives up the work, and in Nishkam Karma Yoga, one gives up the fruits of the work. He does not try to enjoy the fruits of his actions. So in this way, he becomes liberated, right? Because both are equivalent, but in the it's much easier to actually practice Nishkam Karma Yoga, because by performing Nishkam Karma Yoga, which is the natural, all of us need to work in this world, otherwise we get mad. We need to use our senses and engage in this world. So it's very difficult to give up without actually having certain level of control of mind, right? So it's always advised to actually work, but with detachment from the desire to enjoy the fruits of work, right? It does not mean that you have no motivation to work. It does not mean you become lazy at work. It does not mean you're not inspired to work. So you work, give your best, but You are not attached to the fruits. Sometimes you get good results, sometimes you get promotion, sometimes you get demotion, or it doesn't matter. As long as you work sincerely and understand that the fruits of work, you know, Bhoktaram Yajita Prasam. Everything I do is actually for the satisfaction of the Lord. I'm like a spoke in the wheel, right? I just need to support the wheel. That's my role and responsibility. So with that understanding, if one works in this world, he is correct, correctly situated. One who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated, he is in the renounced order of life. He is as good as he is being renounced. And he is a true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Yeah. What is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga. Sannyasa and yoga are same, or linking oneself with the Supreme. Yoga means linking oneself to the Supreme. O son of Pandu, for one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Yogi is the aspect of connecting to the Supreme Lord. Right? Soul, there is higher thing is super soul. The lower thing is the material sense objects. Right? The yogi has to give up the disconnect himself from the spirit of enjoying sense gratification in this world. At the same time, link himself to the Supreme Lord. Right? Both are part and parcel. Unless you disconnect yourself, meaning unless you give up the desire to enjoy this world, you cannot really connect yourself to the Lord. Right? So both are related. For one who is a neophyte, means very new to the practice of yoga, to the eightfold yoga, work is said to be the means. You should not give up the work because you're still attached to the senses, and so it's better you perform your work. While performing your work, slowly you detach yourself from the fruits of enjoy, from the desire to enjoy the fruits of your work. So slowly progress in the path of karma yoga. Work is said to be the means. This is called yoga, yoga ruda, and yoga rurukshu. So yoga rurukshu is the beginning stage where one is recommended to work. Arurukshu, yeah, who has just begun. This is yoga rurukshu, which is the beginning stage. Arudasya, yoga arudasya means one who has attained the perfection in the yoga. So these are the levels. One is yoga rurukshu in the beginning stages. Work is said to be the means. He must work. Like all of us, we are in the beginning stages. So we must work. We must engage our senses. We should not give up the work. While engaging senses in this world, try to be detached from the fruits of from the spirit of enjoying the fruits of the work. And for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. But if one is elevated, he can give up the work because he has purified himself from the desire to enjoy the fruits. Once you develop that higher taste, once you have higher like transcendental realization, once you are able to connect with God strongly, then it is okay to give up material activities. Yeah. So concerning the Eightfold System, attempts in the beginning to enter into meditation through regulative principles of life and practice of different sitting postures are considered fruitive mental activities. All such activities lead to achieving perfect mental equilibrium. The whole idea of Eightfold Yoga system we discussed last week, right? Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dhyana, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. So the whole idea is to mechanically keep the mind in control. Right? It's a mechanical process. It does not use consciousness as a tool to actually uh, control the mind. They are considered fruity matter. All such activities lead to achieving perfect mental equilibrium to control the senses. When one is accomplished in the practice of meditation, he ceases all disturbing mental activities. then he will stop all mental activity, disturbing mental activities. A Krishna conscious person, however, is situated from the beginning on the platform of meditation because he is always thinking of Krishna. Right? So for a devotee, he is always working to the satisfaction of Krishna. Right? He is cooking or going for the job. Everything he is always he's chanting every day, always expressing every activity as service to Krishna. Right? So he's and being constantly engaged in the service of Krishna, he is considered to have ceased all material activities. No, all his activities are already transcendental. So it's naturally made like that because the way his consciousness is, he is working at the level of consciousness. So one can go in this, step-by-step method, practice all these methods like yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. You can do all of that. Or one can fix his consciousness on Krishna directly and engage everything, everything he does as service to Krishna and achieve the perfection, cleansing of his mind through the practice of Krishna consciousness. Both will lead to the same place, but one is like a staircase method. The other is like an elevator method. This is the elevator method, Krishna consciousness. The goal is same. Ultimately, what you are trying to do, connect with God, right? So the same thing is achieved by constantly focusing, thinking of Krishna in everything we do. Yada hinendriyardheshu na karmasva anusajjate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yogarudasya tadochate. Yeah, Varalakshmi Mataji, can you read?
A person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities.
This is yoga rurukshu state. So I said yoga rudha and yoga rudha and yoga rurukshu. So this is yoga rudha, means a person who is elevated. This is yoga rudha. Yoga rudha, elevated in yoga. A person who is elevated in yoga means I'm talking. This chapter is primarily about dhyana yoga, but a person if he is elevated in dhyana yoga, having renounced all materialism, this is the first thing to happen, right? If this happens, then he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. So naturally, what happens? If he's already, if the heart has no desire to enjoy the fruits of his work, right? He already purified himself to that level. Then he neither acts for sense gratification, right? Whatever actions he performs is for the loka kalyanam, is for the good of everybody. Right? He does not engage in activities for his own gratification anymore, nor engages in fruitive activities. Right? He does not try to satisfy himself, nor engage in activities that will give material fruits, because he clearly understands the material fruitive activities are temporary, and the results are also temporary. One who understands that very well, he gives them up, right, completely. Basically his consciousness is elevated. Like for example, all of us as children, we were playing with a lot of toys, right? Even my daughter, 3-year-old, she plays with car toy, and today morning she was asking me to sit down, and she's actually having a big toy kitchen, and she's cooking something, pizza and burger, and she's giving to me and asking me to eat. So all those activities, as she outgrows, in like 2 more years, as she outgrows, she thinks, this is like childish play. This is not going to give her any more joy. She thinks that this is all, illusory activity, right? In one way. As her consciousness outgrows those childish desires to enjoy those, aspects of cooking and all, in a those toys will not give her any more joy. So similarly, all of us had certain kind of desires at various ages. Like in college, we want to hang out with friends and go to movies. Now we don't do that. Like, and now as we are married, we are thinking of making more money or whatever. Right? Every age has certain. It's just based on your age, you have certain material desires. You don't think about going into IIT or those are gone now. You will think about your children going there now. Or Ivy League here. Doesn't matter. Same thing. Same idea. So our desires will change as we age differently. Right? But as one advances in his consciousness, as he focuses on Krishna more and more, he becomes more and more Krishna conscious. He understands, these are all temporary things, and one day I have to give up everything and give up this body, give up this home, give up this family, give up this children, give up everything, give up this country, give up everything, and go to my next life. My journey will continue, and will continue. It's not like there will be millions of life already I live. There will be millions more life I will be living. Continue. So one who understands in this way that this life is a temporary setting right now that I have, and I should not be too attached. I am here. My real goal is to connect to the Supreme. I have disconnected, and so I am here in this world right now, and I am going through Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Mama, going through so many lifetimes of the same chewing the chewed, right? Chewing the chewed means like somebody eats bubble gum again and again, trying to get the juice out of it. But over a period of time, or like multiple lifetimes, we have we're exhausted. It's the same thing. It doesn't change the taste. So you come back as animal, come back as lady, come back as man, because you have certain desires unfulfilled, right? I want to become rich man. Okay, next life you become a millionaire. After becoming millionaire, you try to enjoy and become reckless and do nonsense. Then you become in the next life some lower form. Again you pray, somehow I want better life. Again you get a better life. So in this way, our life is like going toss on a toss. One side, one time going higher, one time going lower. There is no end to this cycle. So one who recognizes after acknowledging the knowledge of, accepting the knowledge of given in Bhagavad Gita, one who acknowledges and focuses on his real goal of life, right? This is a great opportunity. This human form is a great opportunity. Now I should use this, higher consciousness that I have in my position to actually achieve the perfection of life. One who, in that way, then he diverts his attention to the ultimate benefit of human life, that human life offers. And he ceases engaging, for sense gratification and, leads a very purposeful and meaningful life in this world. Then everything is, anything happens in his life, his ultimate goal is to go back to God. Just like Jada Bharat, have you heard about Bharat Maharaj, story of Bharat Maharaj? Did I ever tell? Anybody? The story of Bharat Maharaj?
He becomes a deer in the next life.
No, he becomes deer in his next life, yes. So our country was named after Bharat. Bharat Varsh. He is not brother of Lord Rama. So this name came much before Lord Rama's appearance also. So this Bharatvarsh is named after great King Bharat, much before Rama's appearance, Lord Rama's appearance. So he was a great king. He renounces the world, at an appropriate age, giving his kingdom to his son, and he goes to forest. But he was a king, right? He has this nature of maintaining people. There he finds a deer which was helpless, is going to be usurped by a lion. So he catches and gives it shelter. He protects him, and he renounced the kingdom to actually meditate and perfect his life. That was his goal. But this deer comes to his life, and his focus on meditation goes away. Ashtanga yoga, and he was a practitioner of Ashtanga yoga, and he deviates in his practices. His consciousness is now, instead of being filled with Paramatma, he was meditating on deer all the time. Who will take care of deer? He would feed her like a baby. He would take care of the deer like a baby, and he would give up his meditation. Always trying to protect his deer from the wild animals of the forest. So in this way, he distracts from his path. And unfortunately, death comes at the time for Bharat Maharaj, and he leaves the body. And in his mind, what is there? No, Krishna is not there. Who is there? Deer is there. Right? So, unfortunately, in his next life, he becomes what? Anybody remembers? He becomes a deer. But because he lived a very, very wonderful life in the past, very religious and very spiritual life, he remembers his past. So that was the benediction given to him. Even as a deer, he remembers his past life. So he is very careful. He would, even as a deer, he would always regret the mistake he did in his past life, and always try to remember Lord. And he would only stay near ashramas of great great munis and acharyas. So always trying to participate in their programs. Even though he's in an animal body, he was always remembering his past life. So that was the benediction. He lives a very careful life, and in the next life he becomes Bharat. This time he's called Jada Bharat. He is son of a big Jamindar in the third life. He's the youngest son, and now he remembers past two lives as the king and as the deer, because he lived such a pious life as a deer. He remembers all the both lifetimes. Now in this life he got a human body. He is 100% determined to perfect his life. He does not want to take any chances. So he was always worried about attachments of this world, right? One second. Haribol Prabha, I'm in a class. I will call you back. Yeah. So that was the situation he was in. Sorry, where we are? Yeah. So he's in this life he is very strict about his going back to Godhead, perfecting his life, and he's so careful not to be disturbed by anything that would come in his way, because he already learned lessons in two lives. He doesn't want to miss the chance this time. He would act like a person who is foolish, and his brothers sometimes would treat him and would not give him food. He would not complain, because his goal is very clear. He knows this human life is meant just to perfect his existence. That's the only purpose of human life. That's his 100%. So his brothers would give him bad words, because he would not do much work also. He just does some simple work. He doesn't want to be entangled. He doesn't want to marry. He doesn't want to do anything. Just does some simple responsibilities, but he would act like mad, because he doesn't want to get any name, fame, or anything. Just want to lead a simple life, somehow get out of this world, right? This is like a toilet, right? Just finish your job and get out. So that's how he leads his life. And at one point, some some tribal people catch him. Tribal people will catch him and they want to offer him to Kali. Right? Tribal people, they have certain pujas where they offer a living animal to their worshipful mother, right? Kali. They are all worshippers of Mother Kali, so they want to offer him. So first they give him good bath, give him good clothes, give him very good food, and ultimately take this Jada Bharat to offering him before Kali, and they take a big knife about to cut his head. As they're about to cut his head, Mother Kali appears from the deity and actually kills all the people who are trying to kill him, because she understands this person is the greatest devotee of Lord. How can such mistreatment can happen? So in that way, he was protected in this life. Okay, and then he goes back, like as if nothing happened. He would not talk about it with anyone, and he continues his life. And at one point, there was the king. The kingdom was ruled by a king called Rahugana, and Rahugana was, one time going in the forest, and he was being carried in a palanquin, and one of the, there are 4 people needed to carry the palanquin, and one person was missing at the time, and so they request Jadabharat, who was around there, and he's very strong, stout person, so they call Jadabharat to help him. Jadabharat comes and he carries one of the side of the palanquin for the king Rahugana, and he was walking. While he was walking, he was very careful not to, even step on an ant. So he would be jumping up, sometimes, or moving on the side. So the king gets very much annoyed. Who is this? Who is this person who is giving me such pain while I am actually in palanquin? He doesn't recognize the king of the country, right? So Rahugana becomes mad and he blasphemes Jadabharat. Jadabharat already knows he was the king of the world in just a couple of lifetimes back. He knows all of that. He would be quiet for some time, and after some time, he would speak such philosophy, just to out of compassion for King Rahugana. Oh king, you think you are now king, but in your next life you don't know what you'll become. You may become an animal. Just I'm talking from my experience. He doesn't say that, but the whole philosophy he speaks. It's a great philosophy talked about in Bhagavatam. So I'm relating all these stories. The Bali story and this story, they're all from Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam gives all these wonderful stories to inspire us to focus on devotion service in our life, right? So it's a wonderful narration. The conversation between Rahugana and Jadabharat, and at the end of it, Rahugana realizes this is a self-realized soul. I need to surrender, and he accepts Jadabharat as his guru right after. Right. So that is a person in the yoga Ruda stage. Right? So in that way, Jadabharat, in that life, he perfects his life. He leads such a renounced life without any material desires. So he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. This is exhibited by Jadabharat. So such a person is elevated in yoga, and having renounced all material desires, neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Right? So one who has no such relation must mechanically try to escape material desires before being elevated to the top rung of the yoga ladder. But a Krishna conscious person can do everything for the satisfaction of Krishna and thereby be perfectly detached from sense gratification. So the good thing about Krishna consciousness is you can act in this world, but in your consciousness you are thinking, I'm doing everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thereby perfectly detached from the propensities for enjoying this world. Uddhared atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva hi atmano bandhur atmaiva ripur atmana. Uma Mataji, can you read? Uma Mataji, can you read? Okay. Sri Vidya Mataji, can you read?
Yes, Prabhu.
One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well.
So now Lord Krishna is talking about mind. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind. Mind is the central sense, right? Coordinating sense. It's called coordinating sense. All the senses like ears, hands, mouth, nose, all these are getting knowledge from this world. Right? Through eyes you see and you learn. Through nose you smell and you gain knowledge through all these senses. And all, what are they doing? They're all giving this knowledge to mind. Mind is processing the data, right? And mind has a repository of all the past experiences. So that's why when you see gulab jamun, your mouth waters because you have past experience of eating very sweet, that's sweet. And so immediately you are given that reminder about the past experience. And so you immediately remember that past experience. Naturally, your tongue would salivate because your mind is giving you the past experiences into it just brings those. Mind is not just the repository, so mind is the repository, and intelligence helps us to finally make a decision. Now mind says go and enjoy the gulab jamun, right, as soon as you see it. But intelligence says no, it's not good for you, you already have diabetes, don't eat the gulab jamun, it is going to harm you, right? So intelligence is that particular part of our body. It's a subtle element, it's not a gross. Intelligence is the subtle matter that we all have, that guides us on taking the right decision, to do or not to do. Before making any decision, we have two choices, right? To do or not to do. And sometimes we are tempted so strong, you can't be stopped, right? You go and it doesn't matter, okay, this one time I'll do it. You do the mistake, right? You eat it, right? And then you get sick. So it's like that, right? So mind is the repository of all the past experiences. It is the coordinating sense. It brings all the information, you process it. And intelligence, if intelligence is weak, you fall all the time. You fall prey to all the, you see a nice car, you want to buy it. You see a nice home, your neighbor bought it, you also want to buy it. You saw your friend getting promotion, you also want to get it. So you're always distracted in so many ways. If your mind should not control intelligence. If intelligence is strong, then intelligence says no, right? Mind should be controlled. And where is intelligence controlled? How do you strengthen your intelligence, right? The question is, how do you strengthen your intelligence? How do you strengthen intelligence? By studying scriptures. So through scriptures, we understand what is good for us, what is not good for us, what is the right thing to do, what is not the right thing to do. So that intelligence comes from the study of scriptures. Our intelligence is strengthened by study of Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya means study of scriptures. So when, right, so above intelligence is ego, right? False ego, it's called false identity. So we are thinking we are the doer. right? In this world, we think we are the doer, we are the enjoyer. And so with that kind of mindset, if you are going in this world, you think, yes, this is for my enjoyment, this is for my enjoyment, this is bad, this should be taken away. So we think we are the doer, and that drives our intelligence, and our intelligence drives, so in that way, the control is completely flipped, right? So, but if the ego understands that I'm not the dominator in this world. I'm not the dominator of the things of this world. No, I need this, I want this. You can say like that. But instead, one considers himself actually subordinate to God. Right? When one understands that he is actually servant of Lord, then the whole equation changes. So the ego now drives intelligence to do the right things, and intelligence actually drives the mind. The whole order is reversed. In the general world, in general, one who does not practice yoga, what happens to him? Sense objects pull the senses. Sense objects means, a new car, a new home, or a promotion. The sense objects pull the senses, or senses are attracted to it. Senses run after it, and mind is weak. Mind also is weak. Mind overpowers intelligence, and intelligence makes wrong decisions. Intelligence, okay, let me go after it. I want to get it, right? So intelligence is spoiled, and the ego is also gone, because ego also is thinking, I must be the enjoyer. That is how I can be happy in this world. I must be the enjoyer of this car. If this car is there, it's for my satisfaction, right? So the whole order of control is from the sense object. Sense objects control senses. Senses control mind. Mind controls the intelligence. Right? Intelligence, defines your ego. You see the order? Now, what we are trying to do as we study Bhagavad Gita, as we learn these concepts, we understand that mind is to be controlled. And how do you control mind? You need to have strong intelligence. How do you strengthen intelligence? By study of the scriptures. Understand, at ego level, you understand, I'm not the enjoyer in this world. Instead, I'm actually servant and subordinate to the Supreme Lord. When you understand your ego is purified, okay, now the order is completely reversed. Ego says, I am subordinate to God. Then intelligence drives the whole, the whole vehicle of the body. Now right in it. So every time you have a choice: should I eat this gulab jamun or not, or should I buy this car or not? Intelligence says, no. What is the point? Car is there just to move you from place A to place B, and you already have a car. Why do you need to change your car right now? Does it matter after 50 years? Does anybody talk about what car did you drive today? Does it matter? Now after 30 years, when you are old, and when you are 80 years, does anybody talk about what car did you drive or what did you eat? No, it doesn't matter. It's a temporary, driven by your sense gratification. You are doing all this nonsense. So one understands this aspect. Now intelligence is strengthened. The intelligence will drive the mind. Mind cannot, propose, okay, go and enjoy this. No. The mind has full control on the senses. Senses won't run after the sense objects. So the order is reversed by this wisdom of Gita. Any questions on this? It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. We steadily practice chanting and studying of the scripture. But over a period of time, this gets fixed in the mind. Once that is fixed, you are set. Yeah, please. Any questions so far?
How to differentiate, Prabhuji? So some things are actually like one person does not have a car means he has to buy a car, or so anything comes from desire only. So how to differentiate between, how to get a balance?
Yes, basically you understand your means, right? If your means is that you are getting say $5,000 per month, and your desires are for much higher than what you can afford. That clearly tells you're driven by your desires. But if you don't have the car, you need a means to go from place A to place B, and you settle for something not too expensive, not too cheap. That is fine, right? But if you are if you are driven by the need, then you are fine. If you are driven by your greed, then you are not fine. That is how you should see. If you are so it's about how so there will be needs and there will be desires, right? So the desire could fall in the need category or greed category. So we should clearly differentiate. If we are not very clear, we can check. Sometimes we cannot objectively think, and in that case, you can check with your a person who is spiritually can guide you, right? So that way you are sure you are not suppose you are having a home and you bought a 1 bedroom home, but you are in 1 bedroom home. Now you bought the home or rented that home when you are only like you and your husband, just two of you are living. Now you have say 2 children and they are growing and they need their own room to stay and study and all that. So now if you go from 1 bedroom to say 3 bedroom or 4 bedroom, 3 bedroom is enough. You don't need 4 bedroom, but and your pocket permits it, that is okay because it's driven by need, not by greed, right? But if you go to a bigger home which you cannot easily afford, and to pay the mortgage you have to really spend 50% of your salary, you're going over the means, right? That's how it is. So there is no demarcation what is really greed versus what is need. So it's up to individuals to actually check their own consciousness whether they are crossing the line, right? And if in doubt, you can always check.
Yeah.
So mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well, right? So mind can degrade us if it is driven by the propensity to enjoy this world, right? If many people have the desire, they are driven by desire all the time until they become very old. The desires are still very strong. So we think maybe after becoming old I'll become desireless, I'll be happy. No, it does not become. It doesn't work like that. So one time, I don't remember who it was. I think Chanakya Pandit takes the king to an old man's home because the king was not very focused on spiritual life. He's I don't know exactly if it's Chanakya Pandit or somebody else, but his minister takes the king to the place of an old man to just teach him about the importance of focusing spiritual life. And when taking the king, he also asked the king's daughter to be accompanied. And here is the old man whose house, the king, the minister, and the daughter of the king, who is only like 20-year-old. All the three of them visit. And the old man is so old, he can't even open his eyes and receive or stand or talk. He finally, the king and the minister and the daughter visit the place. And the old man finally understands that there is somebody visiting his home and he opens his eyes. As soon as he opens his eyes, he only focuses on the girl, the 20-year-old girl, because she's so beautiful, very young and very beautiful. He would not spare a minute to see the king. And they all go back. And the minister says, so this is how the mind works. Even though this guy is so old, he can't do anything, but his mind is so focused on your daughter because he still has the material desires very strong in his, even though he has no opportunity, body does not support, but his desires are equally as strong as when he was young, unfortunately. So there is no point in waiting till the old age to actually start practicing spiritual life and focusing mind on the, the higher purpose of life. So in this way, the king learns that he has to start right away, not wait till the old age comes. Yeah. So in fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature. And in this way, the conditioned soul may be saved. What should not degrade oneself by the attraction of the sense objects. The more one is attracted by the sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more it's, and these desires only will increase with every single life. And that naturally increases how many lifetimes you have to come back to this world. So the best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage mind in Krishna consciousness. Always understand that you are servant of Krishna, and you have to, always mindful that you are servant of Krishna. You are not here to enjoy this world. This is a great opportunity to actually perfect your life, and every day chant the holy name and always remember Krishna in your mind. Right? The word he is used for emphasizing this point, that one must do this. He said, Mana eva manushyana karanam bandha mokshayo bandhaya vishaya sango mukchai nirvisayam mana. For man, mind is the cause of bondage and mind is the cause of liberation. Controlled mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from the sense objects is the cause of liberation. Therefore, the mind which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness is the cause of supreme liberation. Mind is constantly thinking about one's subordination to Lord Krishna, then naturally he is liberated already, because all his actions are with the same idea, right? So that is the idea of this verse. So Krishna talked about the key aspect to be controlled as a practitioner of Ashtanga Yoga. Of course, after hearing Ashtanga Yoga, the practice details, Arjuna would say, Krishna, this is not practical, and I'm not somebody who can do this. We'll hear that in the future verses. Ashtanga Yoga is not practical for a householder like Arjuna, like all of us, right? He's representing all of us. And think about Arjuna, who is so very actually powerful. He has much better control on his mind. He has with his Dhanurvidya, he can actually control wind. He can stop the flow of wind. That is the potency he has. And such a powerful person is saying, no, I can't do this. Later on will come. But yeah, so now we understood the key thing to be controlled, which is the mind. We'll end here. It's already 6:15. We'll continue next week. Thank you very much. Any questions so far? We'll continue 6th verse. If not, we'll end here. Thank you. Hare Krishna.